So welcome everyone here and who's watching the replay later. This is the first kick-off meeting, interview, exchange of the holistic leadership community. And I am beyond excited to have you all here and especially to have Bakry here today. Bakry is joining from Nairobi, Kenya. And I just want to, Bakry, before I hand over the word to you, I just want to introduce you, if that's okay, if you give me a couple of minutes, because this is not just anyone who's joining. So Bakry and I go back, we met in Sudan in 2019. I was working as a project manager with the United Nations. And Bakry had started his consultancy company, and he was consulting humanitarian sector, the political sector, and also the government. And so because we were both not very typical mainstream corporate people, we gravitated towards each other. And from that moment on, a very deep exchange started, and we've been in each other's lives ever since. And before you tell us about your professional journey, I would like to recount 3 episodes of your early life, Bakri, if that's okay, if you allow me to. I did not ask Bakri for permission, but I want to give the audience an impression, like a feel for who this person, this being is who's joining us today. So the first story I want to recount from when you were around 6 years old. And you were playing with the neighborhood kids, and you thought, like, wouldn't it be fun to bring them to the Nile so they could all go for a swim?
Yeah.
And you took them, and I think you took a donkey cart and you put all the kids on top and you just drove to the Nile, 6 years old. And all the kids had a blast playing in the water.
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment or interpret any of these stories. I just want them to be there commented. The second story I want to tell about you is that you were originally from Sudan, but you grew up in Saudi Arabia. So during summer holidays, you would come back to Sudan to visit your grandparents who lived north of Khartoum, north of the capital. And so many a days, early in the morning, you would just go grab a donkey and just all by yourself ride out into the desert for hours and hours and hours, and no one would know where you're going, what adventures you're going on, and most of the times you'd just be by yourself.
Yeah.
So this was when you were around, what, 11, 12 years old?
Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then the last story is, I love this one because it so much shows your courage, your wisdom far beyond your age. So you grew up in a fundamentalistic military regime under Bashir, under the dictator. And at the age of, I think, 22 or 23, you stood up against the regime and you started, giving out. So this just really touches me. You started handing out leaflets and starting your own political party, if I remember that correctly. You were 22 years old and standing up against a corrupt, fundamentalistic regime.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to interpret any of these stories. I just let them stand as they are. But I do want to say 1 or 2 things about you, Bakri, which is I have never met anyone with this incredible, excuse me, a courage to see where things are and see where things are potentially heading and call them out, say them. You see where most people are too afraid to look. And so what is happening now in Sudan, the catastrophic war that is happening now, you have seen that coming for many, many years, and you warned every party that could have done something against it. So for me, you are a leader who has an incredible razor-sharp intuition. And I'm just going to put this out here. I'm not going to expand more on this because this would be a separate topic. You have what I call an integrated animal, like an integrated animal of, yeah, like you have incredible instincts when you meet people and where situations are heading. And you have the courage to act. You don't freeze, you don't look away like most other people.
Yeah.
So with that, I would like to start the topic of the day, which is surrender. And apologies, actually, I would like for you to introduce yourself and just tell us where you are, what your position is, and a little bit about your professional and leadership expertise. And then we'll dive into the topic of the day. Oh, and sorry, one more thing, just for the structure of today. So the plan is to have 20-30 minutes an interview with Bakri, where we will talk about all these on a specific topic, and then we'll open for a group discussion. So
Perfect.
over to you, my dear friend.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. It's really an honor for me first to be with you and to be part of this community. So my name is Bakri. I'm Sudanese. I'm currently based in Nairobi, and I currently work as a senior political advisor for the Norwegian government, covering East Africa. Previous to that, I used to be regional director for a Danish company, basically. It's a management consulting company, but also focuses a lot on leadership and within organizations. Prior to that, I've also worked as a country director for an international think tank, kind of, that is based in DC with an office in Sudan. I would say these are the most recent professional occupations I've had covered. But throughout the years, I mean, I still remember our conversation, Siobhan, about this, where I wanted to set up my own company, my own consulting company, back in 2018, I think. And I was terrified by the idea, but it was also the reason why I actually chose to do it. I keep telling people this because the company went from $300 in value to multi-million dollars in value in 1 year. And when people ask me, why did you do it? Why did you do this company? I said, because I was scared. I did it because I wanted to challenge myself. I have no interest in business. I'm not a business person, but because I've always thought of this idea of having my own company and managing it and managing people and looking at profit and losses and all these kind of things, had made me feel terrified. And I thought to myself, if I don't do this, I will never touch on the growth area there. So I did it, and it's been a crazy ride, really. Actually, until this moment, it's been a crazy ride. It brought me through so many cross points in my life. I've met with amazing human beings from all over the world. I've met with leaders, global leaders, basically. In fact, just this year, April, had a really nice one-on-one with President Emmanuel Macron in France. I've also met some of the leaders of the European Union, like the Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell and other leaders. Yeah, and the more this path continues, the more interesting it's becoming, actually.
Yes, it's a truly impressive, and it's been very inspiring to watch you take all these steps and take on challenges that are just almost impossible to take on. And so with this, I would like to dive into our topic for today. You just mentioned you've met many, many great leaders, mostly also men. And I want to ask you, why is it so difficult for leaders to surrender? Like, what does surrender mean for these types of leaders? And what does it mean to you?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Siobhan. So to begin with, I want to say that there is a big misunderstanding, at least in my own experience, of what does it mean to surrender. At the beginning, I felt that throughout, my professional career, I thought that being a leader is being on top of everything. And by being on top of everything means that having control over everything. Now, every time something goes wrong, I always blame the fact that I have, not give it as much attention or as much control as I should have. And while doing so, of course, I've made tremendous mistakes. Some of these mistakes is like not trusting people that have the capacity to do their work, or also not trusting just, the willingness of people that, show up to the office every day and do their job. But basically, I would say it's coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of fearing to lose control. And I have seen this with a lot of leaders. Later on, I learned through the hard way after so many bad experiences is that surrendering is actually a key element in leadership. And that as long as you try, and it's like everything else in life, the more you try to control it, the more it becomes challenging and complicated. And this is not limited to leadership, but I see it in every aspect of life. The most important point is for people to understand and to differentiate what is surrendering, because a lot of people might also think surrendering is just like, just sit back and do nothing. But I always say surrendering doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the heart, where you truly surrender to the path that you are in and trust that things will one way work or the other. I have been in situations where logically and mathematically and economically were impossible to pass. But the moment I surrendered, it magically worked out. And this keeps happening to me every time. So I call upon everyone who is whenever they find a challenge, to try this, not to try and overthink and try to control the circumstances, but try to surrender and trust in the outcome. Don't worry about the process. Don't worry about what's going to happen. You already have that within you. It will reveal itself.
So beautiful. Thank you. And I think you touched upon a key element of surrendering, which is trust. Like surrendering feels like letting go of control, losing control to the frightened mind, when actually we just surrender into something much bigger, a much higher intelligence. And that requires a lot of trust. And in your own journey, Bakry, what made you choose the path of surrender? You already kind of touched upon it a little bit, but what were the kind of the watershed moments where you learn, oh, I don't want to bang my head against the wall anymore. There must be a different path. Let me try this. Can you recall one or a couple of specific moments, and also what in your mind, what led you to taking that
Yeah.
different direction?
Yes, there is a very specific moment I still remember. Up to the age of, I think, 25, 26, I used to struggle financially to an extent where it has become every part of my life. If friends ask me, let's go out for dinner or a coffee, I would worry about not having enough money to get to the cafe or to the restaurant and then pay for the meal or pay for the coffee. Like, this is how bad it was. And I remember I've made a decision that I'm not going to allow myself to be controlled by money. I'm not going to allow myself to be controlled by thinking about money. And from this moment onwards, whatever happens, money is not important. I've thought of it in a way of like literally like just like letting go of that dependency on money that controls my life, where I go, what I do, how I do it, who I meet, and eventually my happiness. So I continue it, and this is how I started. I think how I started the company with $300, really not having anything other than this $300. And the moment I became in tune with that, truly, of letting go of dependency on money in any way, shape, or form, I was shocked because money started flowing from everywhere. Like, I think that I wouldn't even look for. Like I recall this very specific moment where someone asked me if I could put him in touch with someone, and I said sure. So I put them in touch with a businessman, and then they did the business, and then it was a big deal, and it was customary in Sudan, and I didn't even know that the person who fixed the deal normally gets commission, and I had no idea. So the person called me and he said, "We need your bank account information." I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, we have made the greatest deal for both companies, and it was all thanks to you." And I was like, I didn't do anything. I just introduced you." They said, "No, no, it's a practice, business practice." And I thought, okay, fine. It's free money. Okay. So I asked, how much was it? 500, I was like, the most ambitious, the highest ambition I had was like 1,000, and it was 25,000 euros. So I was like, this is the like biggest amount of money I've had in a while. And this happened in the first month I started that company. And it just continued this way. When the war started in Sudan, I was in holiday in the country Georgia, in Tbilisi. And I absolutely had nothing. Like not even I only had my return ticket, and I had $200 to stay. So I had no destination, no idea what to do. But I still remember that I was walking in the streets of Tbilisi at night, and still within that space, I kept holding to that thought and to that idea. Things will work out. Money is not a problem. It will find its way. It will work out. And it did. It did. A few friends called and to check on me. I was like, yeah, I'm not in Sudan. I'm in Georgia. And they were saying, are you okay financially? Like you have money on you. I was like, no. I was like, okay, we're sending you money. I was like, no, no, I'll figure it out. And then it just started, like a lot of people even I haven't spoken to in years, like reached out and asked if I was doing okay. And then acquisition of the company I was working had happened, which also gave me some financial stability, and then things just started to work out. And there are many, many, many examples I could give when it comes to that. So as long as, and I keep telling everyone, as long as you like try to control things, it's just, the more control you try to have, things will go on a different direction. And I always give this example of like how the mind works even, if I ask you to not think about a black monkey, for example, jumping, the first thing that comes to your mind is a black monkey jumping. And the same things as emotions, feelings. If you try to control them and not give them the space and surrender to them, they just become amplified, and then you build resistance. And when you build resistance, you block your own growth.
So beautiful. And you really have crazy money stories. These were just a few of them. And so what you just said in your last sentence is that when we surrender to what is, which is us, because all we have is us, our perception is us, is a reflection of our thinking, our belief system, our emotions. So when we surrender to what is, when we surrender to the emotions we have, to the thoughts we have, to everything as it is in this moment, what we find in this surrender is peace.
Yeah.
It's an encompassing container that is large enough to hold all of who we are. And this, I find, is one of the traits that really great leaders have. Leaders who are not just leaders, but also healers.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about this before. When we created enough space within ourselves as leaders, and we have done enough inner work to reconcile our inner parts, the amount of peace that we find in our system will then be extended outward, will reflect in our actions of leadership, and will reflect on those who we lead. So in that way, leaders become leaders and healers versus just leading from egoic structure, leading from their separated sense of self or a fragmented part of their mind, which creates further separation. So in your experience, and I know you have been undergoing this transition from leadership into healership. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how has that changed you? How do you experience yourself as leader and healer? How
Yeah.
do you experience this healership within leadership?
Yeah. No, absolutely. This has been a recent realization in my own life, is the transition from leadership to healership. And you know how we were always told that, not every manager is a leader, but every leader is a manager. In the same way, we can say that not every leader is a healer, but every healer is a leader. So I finally came to that realization. When you come from a mindset of surrendering, when you come from a mindset of trusting, that is being naturally and being who you are, then your leadership does not come from a place of control. It does not come from a place of, a place of wanting to see your own your own perception of success and of growth is different. You don't see, that creating higher profit and minimizing expenses as important as you being a person who's leading people from a place of love, compassion, empathy, giving the space for people to be who they are, trust in who they are, and magically you'll find that the work environment you work in transforms into a very productive and a natural place. So that even when people walk in, they feel like there is something different about this office. There is something different about the vibe of this organization. And this is truly something that I have seen. I recall also upon meeting leaders from all over the world, the ones who really got into me, the ones who really touched me, were the ones that I could see they had no filters. They were completely themselves. Bad or good, they were completely themselves. I have to give an example. I'm going to give two examples. I've met a global leader that is popular and loved by everyone. And when I spoke to this leader, I could not help it but feel two things. The first thing is that he has the most beautiful soul, but everything was so covered up with public perception and media, and everything was an act. And I could see the struggle between his mind and his heart, but and that reflected on him as a person. He looked very tired as a person, and I could see he could not maintain a minute of focus. Like he was all over the place, because there was so much going on. He worries so much about what's happening outside. And there is another leader that I met. He has control over, I don't want to say control, but I want to say that people follow him. The moment you talk to him, people follow him. What he did with that leadership is a different story, but he had people who literally worshipped him for who he is and believed in him for who he is. And he is, as we speak today, he's one of the most strong people in the whole continent of Africa. But what I can tell you about that person is that the moment I spoke to him, the moment I sat down with him, there was no act. There was no fake. There was no strategy. There was no, he was coming from a place of the deep, 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 deep truth of what he believed. Everything he said, everything he did, every word we exchange, I could see that it was coming from a place of truth. Now, who he is and what his background is unfortunate, but the way he carry himself as a leader, and the impact that had on the people following him, there was not a single person in the history of Sudan that there was someone who had this amount of popularity and love prior to him changing into a complete different direction now. But these are the things that I really realized, and the examples are many. when I look at world leaders today, I smile internally because from what I have seen so far, I could tell when someone is just like, yeah, this is an act or this is something to deliver a message. And then when someone is being genuine, which is very unfortunate because it's became so rare.
Thank you, Bakri. I would love to go on forever talking about, like you shared so many deep insights and your wisdom and your observation. And I would love to talk about all of this, especially the two leaders you described. I have to think about integrity in the sense of having all your parts integrated and moving as a whole into one direction.
Yeah.
Whether this be a bad direction or a good direction, but this is power. And someone who tries to cater to outside perceptions of them is giving up their power.
Yeah.
So this has been amazing. I do want to get back to the topic of surrendering and what surrender allows us. So maybe last question, if you can answer this briefly, and then we'll give it up to if they have questions. What has surrendering allowed you to do, be, experience, or to extend to others when you step into surrendering and healership?
I would say, in a very simple sentence, growth in every direction. Every direction, if you look at every direction of life, work, private life, hobbies, anything, when you implement the concept of surrendering, you will have surplus of everything. Not enough, but even more. More to the extent where you're like, okay, this is too much. Like, I don't want this, like this is too much. And that brings you to brings us back to the point of like where you think, okay, I'm having too much of this, and you keep asking yourself why, and the answer always goes back to really surrendering.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Bakri. Zand, if you have any questions or any insights of yourself.
Hey, hi everybody. Hi Bakri. Thank you for that. It's really beautiful to hear you. I've spent 15 years or so living around Eastern and Southern Africa, and then a few more years like working various places around the continent. And then I've never lived in Sudan, but I know some of the context that you are referring to and the history as well. The fear, like what you said at the beginning about your fear, interested me. So I mean, I think you said that because you're scared, you went there. Like that was, that was like your direction. The fear was the direction. Like what? And like on paper, I know that. But putting it into practice, I find it much more difficult because the fear is, strong.
Yeah.
My sort of flavor of ice cream when it comes to fear is what other people will think of me. That's the one that just trips me up
Yeah.
with business stuff, with social stuff, with community stuff. So I loved hearing about your fear. And I mean maybe you could like tell us like what your sort of fear was then, and it like how it is, how it's now 6 years on. Are do you still have it? Does it still kind of guide you? And I mean, if you've got any sort of thoughts or insights into like the mindset of actually stepping into the fear, that'd be great.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. That's a really good question, and I will come to exactly also the fear of perception of other people because, and Siobhan knows this. This has been also part of my journey, but when the mindset that I came with when I first started the company, when I was so scared of failing. I was scared of not finding funding. I was scared of potentially this failing might lead me to jail because in Sudan, business is very serious, and if you mess something up, it will could eventually lead you to imprisonment and so on. So, but then most importantly, I was afraid of my idea of my own self, which is, am I good enough? Am I good enough as a leader? Am I good enough as a manager? Can I do this? And it's something that I felt that yes, but I was too afraid. I had no trust in myself in that path. I knew that I had that quality somewhere inside, but I was afraid of myself. I was like, what if I fail? Then my whole idea of myself being a leader is going to be destroyed. Because then before letting down everyone, I'll be letting down my own self. And when I did that, I remembered that fear is really where we have to, like, fear is a blessing because it shows you, it's just, fear is just the surface and it leads you into like really deep, deep, deep inside. And the more you look inside, the more you look. So my fear of starting this company was in its essence, a belief that I was not enough and that I was not worthy. And starting this company was kind of like a healing process for me. I promise you, it was a pain in everything. Like it was so painful. I had days where, like I didn't know what to do, lost every direction. But if I go back in time and do this experience again, I would do it not because of, success it had eventually, but because of the growth it built on me. Which brings me to the other fear that you said. I used to be in the same position, and I still am to many in several occasions. Is that what other people think? 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would count for everything, like what this person think of me. And the funny enough, the more I got scared or the more I worried about these things, the more they increased. So then I learned, again, brings us back to surrendering. I was like, you know what? People can say whatever they want to say. I am on my path. I have my pros and cons, success and failures, and the right people for me will always be around me. And the right situations and the right circumstances and the right opportunities will arise. So I literally just stopped caring. And then it got to a point where people couldn't. So Sudan is a very politicized, especially in the last 4 years, it's been very politicized environment. So, and because I always spoke from the truth, it doesn't matter where the truth, at least what makes sense to me, doesn't matter who it matches or who it goes against to, I would always speak it. And the societies we live in today are very, let's say, if you don't fully agree with me, then by default you are against me. So a lot of rumors started to come about who I am and where I stand politically. So I have had everything. People thought, oh, he's on the side of the army. Others said, no, 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 he's on the side of the RSF. Others said, no, no, he's on the side of the Islamists. No, 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 he's on the side of the atheist. So I've heard it all. And I keep remembering this to the extent where even one of the things I heard is like, okay, how could someone be in this age and do all of this if they were not part of the world, the global, what was the name? It's like a global council that leads the world through evil and through.
Freemasons, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
People
I've
also
heard,
people also like told stories about you being in the National Security Police, like really, really bad. That was the police that oppressed and tortured people. So Bakri he's been through some witch hunts. So he
which
knows a
one?
thing or two about people's perceptions on him, and they actually had implications. Like you had difficult situations in your professional standing because of
Yeah.
rumors that were spread about you. Like you had to counter some of them. So those had actually real life implications for you. Those rumors that were
Yeah.
spread. And I just want to say one sentence: if you step into your power, people will spread rumors about you. You will trigger people,
Mm.
and it's part of your journey to build a container and a strong enough core to hold them and still continue on your path.
Yeah. No, and then the same happens when I chose to surrender and not really, and by surrendering, you by default let go. By letting go, you really don't care. So you genuinely start not caring because you know that the more you are in tune with who you are as a person, the more that you are in tune with your truth, then the more your path becomes clear. It might not be clear to other people, but trust me, it will be so clear to you in a way that would blow your mind. Like I have never, in the peak of where people were like spreading rumors and doing these kind of things, the moment I chose to let go and I was focused on my path, like magic happened. Opportunities started to come from places that I was not even imagining. Like out of the blue, you are called to do something, would change the world basically. Like, and it was like, okay, but how, So, and then I started thinking of like every leader that has been, let's talk about, even though, regardless of what people's belief system is, but if you think about in religion, for example, every prophet, spiritual leader have had I always say, I tell my Muslim friends, look at Prophet Muhammad. The things that have been done to him when it comes to perception is insane. They called him crazy. They called him like a magician. They kicked him out. They beat him out. The story is long. And when I talk to my Christian friends, I was like, can you imagine someone who has been trying to, in the narrative, of course, someone who has been trying to save you, and then you end up like crucifying the guy. Like literally, he's there to help you grow, and so on. I'm just giving example and by these figures because they are the most known figures in our history. But I cannot think of any leader who has not been through all of these kind of perceptions. But the one thing I can tell you is that the more I let go, the more I surrender. Of course, we are human beings. We have days where we are vulnerable and one perception or doubt of yourself might make you feel a bit like restless, but eventually the more it's a practice, the more you learn how to let go, is the more you really become free, and things really work out for you in ways you couldn't even imagine. And if I may add just two main points, our minds, have always been, they are conditioned by the way we were brought up, our childhood, the way we were raised, our community, and so on. There's so many factors, but also that mind has the capacity of doing wonders. I really trust in that. And there are two things that I really love, and I keep telling people, every time, especially in hard times, is that when the light bulb was discovered, I loved what he said about because failed 99 times and then succeeded 100 times. And then instead of saying I failed 99 times, he said I found 99 ways of how this is not going to work. There is a Japanese saying also that I appreciate a lot. It says that success in its abstract meaning is not about arriving to the point where you are wishing to be. It's more about your stamina. So basically, they're saying that if you fall once, your ability to get up the second time. If you fall 2 times, then your ability to get up on the 3rd time, and so on. And this is the path of success. In all honesty, sometimes I think to myself, nothing makes sense. Nothing that I'm doing makes sense. Nothing, the world we live in doesn't make sense. Everything, like, it doesn't make sense. But I have 2 options. Either to really navigate and start to come to it with a curious mind, open mind. You would fail, you will succeed, it doesn't matter. What matters is the experience, and I want to enjoy this path and see what it brings to my life. And imagine if we had a life where we know exactly in details, you have a plan, or you have like a book telling you this is how your life going to be for the next year, every day, every detail, what you're going to have for lunch, who you're going to meet, what are you going to talk about. It will be tasteless. But really just, waking up every day and thinking that, and by the way, I might seem to you as I'm someone who's like on top of everything. Trust me, my life is a mess now. And Siobhan knows this. It couldn't be more messy. I cannot tell you on every level, really. Like it cannot be more messy. But I look back at all the experiences I have been through, and I would do them again because it has been a hell of a ride. And if I end up dying today or dying tomorrow, I can't wait to be reincarnated again so that I can take the same experience over and over.
I'll ask another question. And thanks for your question. Like you could have been speaking for me, really. I hear everything you say, and also have experienced it. So in terms of like surrender as a concept, I think there's when I sort of feel into it, it feels like, that thing you said about like surrender's not doing nothing. And there's drive and resilience and like power and commitment to a particular cause. And then there's, let's call it, knowing when to surrender. In terms of like business, have you got like some examples of what surrender is? I mean, is the example you're giving earlier were just about surrendering around the fear, surrendering around what people think of you, and that sort of thing. Like I don't imagine you're meaning, although maybe you are, I've tried this business plan like 5 times, 6 times, it's just not working. I'm going to surrender it and change direction.
Yeah.
Like there's a bit of a sort of gray area, to what extent is like commitment and not surrendering required, and with what types of things does surrender mean surrender in this context?
Yeah. No, so this gives, I mean, this is a really good question. I always say there is a huge difference between giving up something and surrendering into something. Just to give you a concrete, let's say that I am in a company or in an organization where I am not happy, I am not satisfied, I am not, but then I'm too afraid of leaving because everything that I do depends on this job that I have. There is a difference. You could give it up, not knowing. And when I say this, so this is all goes back to really who you are, like to yourself. It has nothing to do with the outside world. When you walk away, you could walk away in 2 ways. You could walk away surrendering or giving up. It's a very thin line. So if you walk away giving up, it's like, yeah, I'm tired. I don't want to be in this place anymore. I cannot take it anymore. I'm just going to quit. This is giving up. Surrendering is when you come from a place of like, okay, this is not working out for me. I am going to let go of it. And I will take the next step. I don't know what's going to happen. Same as in the first scenario, you don't know what's going to happen, but you're basically you're giving in, not giving up. You're giving in to your own path and seeing where this would lead. If you look at the scenarios from the 2 scenarios from an external perspective, they're exactly the same. These are 2 people who gave up their job. But if you look at it from internal perspective, someone walked because they were dissatisfied, because they were angry, because they were having all the negative qualities, while the other felt like, no, I'm just gonna, I'm going to basically like take the next step in my path, which might not be in this place. And eventually it brings us back to the belief is that the universe or life in general, it's all about what you give out in terms of energy. If someone comes from in any situation, like it could be a marriage, it could be whatever, like if someone is coming from a place of like anxiousness and anger and disappointments and hate and vengeance and all of these kind of things, then they are putting that energy out and it will come back to them. And that's why things go really bad in let's say divorces and so on. But if you talk to people who have been in marriage and then the marriage itself didn't work out. And you see that they still have that kind of like platonic love and respect and appreciation towards each other. And like you could even, when you see them, you could even think that they are together. That the place where they came from was different from the other couple, because they were really coming from a place of like, okay, it's not your fault, it's not my fault. It just was a mismatch. You're an amazing human being. I'm an amazing human being, and these things sometimes just don't always work out. So to me, the difference is really internal between surrendering, and it's funny because you actually can tell when you internally surrendering, you can tell, and when you are internally giving up, you can tell. Even if you can't put your hands on it, it's a feeling, it's an intuition. You feel like, okay, am I surrendering to this or am I giving up?
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know, Siobhan, if you have.
Yeah, my experience with surrendering has been surrendering the idea what things should look like, the form in which they should be working out, continuing on my path exactly as you say, not giving up on who I am and knowing what is possible for me and knowing why I'm here, but surrendering any form of what it should look like. And that's freedom. And when I surrender the form of what it should look like, my mind kind of snatches back from being in future scenarios to the present moment, because my path is right here, right now. It's not in the future.
If I may just add to this point, Siobhan, I recently have been really trying to look into manifestation and how it works. And I've even been debating with people about how realistic it is, because I recently found out that, for example, Tesla had a whole book on manifestation, and a lot of people I was like, okay, so this is Tesla. We follow everything he says when it comes to electricity and power and so on. But when it comes to manifestation, we just throw that book because we cannot understand it. But one of the things that I really learned, and why that a lot of manifestations don't work, is because we focus on the path. We try to manifest the path rather than try to manifest the result. And in manifestation, it doesn't work like that. I found out this is recently, like if you would like to be in a specific place in a specific time, let's say if you want to have $1 million in your bank account in 2 years, do the manifestation, the proper manifestation for it. I would advise really to use the Tesla theory. It's very interesting because it deals with energy as it is, and this is especially for people who are like, might be skeptical, but do the manifestation, focus on the results. Do not even think about how you're gonna get there. It will happen. Just have the manifestation done in that way.
Thank you so much. Any more questions or sharings?
No, I have to go, but thank you very much, all of you, for this call. Thanks for sharing your experience, Bakry. And I'm very glad I attended and listened, and the energy change that Hiko described, I've also been feeling. Funnily enough, coming into the call in quite a kind of bad space for various things that happened today that were playing on my ego's fears. So, which is just funny how things happen like that anyway. But thank you all.
Definitely looking forward. It was really nice meeting you as well.
Yes, thank you, Heike. We have another same format coming up in 2 weeks, 14 days from now. So I hope, Bakry, you will be able to attend. I would love, Bakry, for you to attend, because we're going to talk about nature and leadership. So I think this is something that can bring a lot of ease and power into leadership. And Bakry, just one last comment, because you said your life is so messy. I just want to say it's not messy, it's a creative chaos. And
Yes.
when we induce chaos into a stuck situation, that's when we see new paths forward. And it's people who live a rigid life who are so very much afraid to meet unknown aspects of themselves and their own power that stay in stuckness.
Yeah.
So I want to, rephrase what you said. And I know it came out of compassion and your humility to say, we wanted to say, it looks like you have everything in place, but everything is a mess. You are perfect. Like, you have an incredible professional way behind you and an even more incredible way forward. And you're such an inspiring, compassionate, yeah, there was a moment in my life when you actually saved me. And I will never forget that. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your wisdom and for being part of this community. It's been incredibly inspiring and empowering and enlightening. And thank you for attending. And I hope we will have many more of these meetings.
Definitely looking forward.
Thank you.
Bye.